Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeated that there will be no permanent ceasefire in the war against Hamas in Gaza until Israel's conditions are met. But he says Israel is willing to pause hostilities for the sake of hostages. President Biden last week proposed a three-phase peace plan, which included a temporary truce and eventual permanent ceasefire. Our Middle East economics and government reporter Abir Abu Hamad joins me right now. And Abir, it became pretty evident over the weekend that within Israel, not just the Prime Minister himself, but other members of the Israeli government were not going to sign on to this Biden proposal on Friday afternoon. Where do things stand right now?
Right, Joanna. So you're absolutely right. President Biden did come up with this plan that we just heard yesterday that the Israelis said that actually not every part of that plan was publicized and some details were kept private, but the pushback is still the same. Israel is saying there will be no permanent ceasefire until Hamas is fully destroyed. Hamas, on the other hand, is saying the only way, the return of the 124 remaining hostages would happen is if a permanent ceasefire was granted. So again, it's a tale of two different sides. We don't know, where things are going to stand, but there's a lot of balls up in the air over the next week. We know that Gantz, who is part of the centrist party in Israel, is saying that we need a wider plan. We need to see what the next day post-war looks like. And he's actually threatened to leave by June 8th, which is in the next 4 days. Yeah. Could very well happen. So we don't know how that leaves Netanyahu's party or what the wider threats to that are.
Yeah, and of course, that was an ultimatum that he gave a couple of weeks ago. And of course, we're getting very close to that date now. So a lot of questions about what Benny Gantz is actually going to do. As for the PM himself, what are the next steps from here?
Right. So, he was supposed to speak in the Congress. We were talking about that. He was supposed to speak in the U.S. Congress, over the next couple of days. But there's a Jewish public holiday, so that date has been postponed indefinitely. We don't know when it's going to happen, but it's definitely, seen as a sign that Netanyahu is still welcome in the U.S. It's a big thing for him to go to the U.S. and speak to the Congress, address Congress members. So it's still, a sign that those ties are still prevalent between the United States and Israel. But as things stand right now, we know that there have been protests in Israel, 100,000 people almost protesting on Saturday. Yeah. That number is expected to accelerate even. So if it reaches numbers that we used to see in the past, 300,000 or even more, that could pose a threat to Netanyahu's governing party.
So yesterday we were speaking to analysts from the region, Kim Khattas, and I've had many conversations with other experts over the weekend, sort of trying to identify why Biden came out with this proposal so strongly, knowing that it would be very quickly rejected by Israeli officials. And some people's perspective is that what they were trying to do was to speak to the Israeli public directly. They know that there's a lot of anger on the streets. 100,000 people were out protesting over the weekend. And I just wonder if the thing that's going to trigger Israel into going down this path of a ceasefire is actually the Israeli public.
Could very well be the case, right? The numbers are accelerating. That those protests in Israel have previously posed a risk to the government. Not that long ago, about a year ago when Netanyahu came back to power, and they could very well be, the voice of the people could very well be what the U.S. is appealing to. But we're not going to know until the coming 2 weeks are going to be a big turning moment in what Israeli politics are going to look like and whether a permanent ceasefire is actually going to happen based on the people's needs.
Yeah, it looks like it.